The sea took everything from her once. She traded a flight suit for scrubs and ran as far from open water as she could, onto a cruise ship of all places. But the ocean doesn't forget the ones who leave it behind. When a Category 3 storm turns the Meridian Star into a floor of screaming metal, and the ship's celebrity doctor freezes at the sight of blue lips and cold skin, the quiet nurse stops pretending, and the face pulled from the black water is one she swore she would never lose again. Welcome back to Secrets of Silent Badges. If a badge, a uniform, or a hidden past has ever changed how you see someone, hit like right now. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from tonight. And if you have not yet, subscribe, because the next silent badge is always closer than you think. Can the nurse even handle a splinter? Dr. Reginald Voss said it loud enough for the whole infirmary to hear. Loud enough for the cruise director filming his segment to catch it too. Maren Kessler didn't look up. She kept wrapping the boy's finger, gauze pulled tight, corners folded flat. Just checking, Voss said, smiling at the camera. Dr. Voss at Sea premieres next month. Might need better material than paper cuts. The boy's mother laughed politely. Maren finished the wrap in silence. She had learned silence a long time ago. Silence kept her hand steady. Silence kept the past where it belonged. Under 11 years, under an ocean, under a name she hadn't spoken since the day she walked off the tarmac and never looked back. 8 months on the Meridian Star. 8 months of seasickness pills and sunburn, and Voss preening for his cameras between real patients. It was the quietest job on Earth. That was the point. Voss moved on, already rehearsing his next line for the cameras, already forgetting the boy existed. Maren checked the boy's pulse anyway. Habit. Steady, fast, fine. You're good, she told him. Ice cream, doctor's orders. He grinned and ran off. Voss didn't correct her for stealing his line. He never noticed things like that. Maren's hands didn't shake anymore. Not on land, not on the ship. It had taken years. What still shook her was the sound of alarms. Not fire alarms. Not the boat drill horn everyone ignored. A specific tone. 2 long, 1 short. The tone a hoist cable made when it locked. She heard it in her sleep sometimes. She heard the woman's voice under it, screaming her name into black water off the coast of Nova Scotia. She heard herself answer too late. Rebecca Ainsley, 29 years old, pulled from a capsized fishing boat in 50-degree water. Maren had reached her. Maren had the line. And then the swell took them both under, and when Maren surfaced, Rebecca wasn't in her arms anymore. They found her 2 hours later. Alive, barely. Brain damage the doctors called significant but stable. Maren had requested a transfer out of the rescue swimmer program 11 days after that. The Coast Guard didn't fight her on it. Some things you can't order a person to keep doing. She scrubbed down the exam table. Outside the porthole, the water had gone the color of a bruise. Storm's picking up, said Priya, the ship's junior nurse, sticking her head in. Captain says it's tracking faster than forecast. Category 2, maybe 3 by tonight. We'll be fine, Maren said. Cruise ships rode out worse. She believed it, mostly. She thought about Rebecca's mother sometimes, still. A card every Christmas for the first 4 years, thanking her for trying, which was somehow worse than if the woman had blamed her outright. Maren had stopped opening them after year 5, not because she stopped caring, because she couldn't survive caring in that particular shape anymore. By 6 p.m., the Meridian Star was rolling hard enough that room service carts slid on their own. By 8, Voss was filming a segment about storm preparedness, with his hair gelled and his smile too wide, standing in front of the infirmary's supply shelves like they were his personal set. Maren restocked trauma kits without being asked. Extra gauze, extra tourniquets, extra warming blankets, though she told herself that was just procedure. Her hands found the edges of a blanket and folded it the way she'd folded 1,000 of them on a cutter deck in the Bering Sea. Corners square, fast, automatic. You're weirdly good at that, Priya said, watching her. Old habit, Maren said. At 9:40 p.m. the ship groaned. Not a normal groan, a deep, structural sound that came up through the floor and into her teeth. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied on backup power. Her pulse didn't spike. Her hands didn't shake. Some part of her, buried under 8 months of quiet, simply woke up. The intercom crackled. The captain's voice, tight and clipped in a way cruise captains' voices weren't supposed to sound. All medical personnel to the infirmary immediately. We have passengers overboard on the aft promenade. Rescue teams deploying now. Voss's face went the color of the porthole water. Maren was already moving before she finished hearing the sentence, already running numbers she hadn't run in years. Water temperature, time to hypothermia onset, drift rate in a following sea. 45 degrees, maybe less. She had 11 minutes before the first one stopped shivering. 15 before the cold started shutting down their heart. She'd done this math 100 times, off the coast of places with better weather than this. She had never once done it wrong, until Rebecca. The infirmary doors slammed open. Crew members carried in a woman, soaked, blue-lipped, unconscious, seawater running off her in sheets onto the floor Maren had mopped an hour before. Voss stood frozen, staring at the body like it might explain itself. "Doctor," Maren said. Sharp. "Doctor, I need you to move." He didn't move. Maren looked down at the woman's face. Gray, slack, eyes closed, dark hair plastered flat across her forehead, and felt 11 years crack straight down the middle. She knew that face. It couldn't be her. Maren told herself that even as her hands were already moving, already checking a carotid pulse that was there, thin, thready, but there. Not breathing on her own. Weak pulse, Maren said out loud, mostly to force herself to keep functioning. "Get me the AED and warming blankets, now." Voss finally unfroze. She's hypothermic. Obviously we should start rescue breaths and get her core temp up before anything else, Maren said, already tilting the woman's head, already positioning for 2 breaths. Cold water drowning isn't like warm water drowning. Don't call it until she's warm and dead, not before. That's not standard protocol on a civilian vessel. It's Coast Guard protocol, Maren said, and didn't stop to notice what she'd just admitted. She gave 2 breaths, watched the chest rise, felt for the pulse again, still there, weaker. "Priya, cut her clothes off, dry towels now. We warm the trunk first, chest, neck, groin. Not the arms and legs. That sends cold blood back to the heart and can stop it." Priya moved instantly. Voss stood by the supply cabinet, arms crossed, watching Maren work like she was speaking a language he'd never learned. Because she was. Maren checked the woman's arm for an IV site. Found one. Taped a line without looking. Running warmed Celine in fast. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't rise. Somewhere behind her ribs, something that had been quiet for 8 months was screaming, and none of it reached her hands. She looked at the woman's face again. Waited for the resemblance to dissolve into stress and coincidence. It didn't dissolve. The scar above the left eyebrow. Thin. Pale. Exactly where Rebecca Ainsley's had been after the boat's railing caught her on the way down. The small anchor tattoo on her wrist, half covered now by the IV tape. 11 years older, hair darker, but it was her face. "She's got a pulse," Maren said, voice flat, professional, while something in her chest detonated. "Keep the blankets on the trunk. I need another one for over her head. We're losing heat fast there too." More patients came in. 2 more passengers, cold and shaking but conscious, pulled from a lifeboat that had capsized in the swell. A crew member with a dislocated shoulder from being thrown against a rail. Voss handled the shoulder, competent enough with something ordinary, useless with anything that required nerve. Maren ran the room. She didn't decide to. It simply happened. The way breathing happens. "Priya, second bed. Get vitals every 2 minutes. Dr. Voss, that shoulder needs traction before it swells more. Inline pull, steady pressure. I'll walk you through it if you need it." "I don't need," Voss started, and then didn't finish, because he clearly did. Maren talked him through the reduction without turning from Rebecca's bedside. Voice level, precise. The kind of precision that didn't come from nursing school. The ship rolled hard. Equipment slid. Maren caught a rolling oxygen tank with her foot without looking down. an old reflex from decks that moved a lot worse than this one. "How do you know all this?" Priya asked quietly, adjusting a blanket. "The cold water stuff. Ship's nurses don't usually—" "Later," Marin said. Voss straightened his coat, trying to reclaim some authority in the room now that the shoulder was reduced and his hands weren't shaking anymore. "I've handled hypothermia cases before," he said, mostly to the small crowd of crew that had gathered at the doorway. "It's not exactly rare on crew's medicine." Nobody was listening to him. They were watching Marin. Rebecca's temperature was climbing, 89.2, then 90.6, still critical, still alive. Marin watched the monitor the way she used to watch a hoist cable, unable to look away, terrified of what happened the second she blinked. "Talk to me," she said, low, to a woman who couldn't hear her. "You made it 11 years without me. Don't stop now." The intercom crackled again, the captain tighter this time. "Medical, we have a second overboard incident. Crew member swept from the lower deck during rescue operations. We need—" Voss looked at Marin, actually looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. "I can't leave her," Marin said, nodding at Rebecca. "But someone competent needs to go down there, because whoever's in the water right now doesn't have 15 minutes. "There's no one else," the captain's voice said through the speaker. "Ship's crew isn't trained for water rescue in these conditions." Marin's jaw tightened. 11 years of walking away collided with 15 minutes of a stranger's life. She looked at Rebecca's monitor, stable enough for now. She looked at Priya. "Keep the trunk warm, recheck the airway every 60 seconds. Do not let her temperature drop again. I'll be back." "Where are you going?" Voss said. Marin was already pulling a wetsuit liner jacket off the supply hook, already rolling her sleeves, already exposing, for the first time in 8 months, the small blue Coast Guard racing stripe tattooed on her ankle. Voss saw it. His mouth opened. "I'm going in the water," Marin said. The aft deck was chaos. Wind tearing sideways, rain like gravel, crew shouting into radios that barely worked over the storm. A spotlight from the bridge swept the black water, catching a shape 30 yards out. An arm, rising, disappearing. Somewhere behind her, Marin could still hear Rebecca's monitor beeping in her mind. She pushed it down, one emergency at a time. That had always been the rule. Waves broke over the lower promenade rail, dragging deck chairs across the tile like they weighed nothing. A safety officer grabbed her arm as she passed. "Ma'am, you need to get below. This deck isn't secure." "There's a man in that water," Marin said, not stopping. "Are you going in after him or am I?" He let go of her arm. "That's the engineer," a crewman yelled at Marin. "Tomas. He went in trying to grab the woman before her. Nobody's got a line on him." Marin looked at the water the way she used to look at it every single shift for 11 years. Not as an enemy, not as the thing that took Rebecca, but as a problem with an answer. 45-degree water, following sea, 6 to 8 foot swells. A man conscious enough to keep his arm up, which meant he had minutes, not seconds. "I need a line, a harness, and someone who can hold a spotlight steady," she said. Her voice had changed, not louder, different. The kind of voice that made grown men move without asking why. "Ma'am, this ship isn't equipped for—" "Then improvise. Get me that mooring line and a life ring. Now." They moved. She didn't have a proper harness, so she rigged one from a cargo strap and a locking carabiner off the emergency gear locker. Knots her hands remembered, even though her mind hadn't touched them in years. Quick figure 8, load-bearing loop. Backup knot behind it, the way you always double it in cold water, because cold hands fail first. "You can't be serious," Voss said, having followed her out, rain soaking through his crisp white coat. "You're a nurse." "Hold the spotlight on him," Marin said. "Don't lose him." She kicked off her shoes. Someone handed her a life ring without being asked, some part of the crowd already understanding, even if their brains hadn't caught up yet, that whatever this woman was about to do, she'd done it before. The wind screamed across the rail. Somewhere below, Tomas's arm broke the surface again, weaker this time. She went over the rail, the cold hit like a wall, exactly the way she remembered, exactly the way she'd spent 8 months trying to forget. Her body wanted to seize. She made it breathe instead, slow, controlled, the way training carves into muscle so deep no amount of running ever cuts it out. She swam toward the arm in the spotlight, cutting across the swell instead of fighting it, reading the water the way she'd read 100 North Atlantic rescues, where it would lift her, where it would try to slam her into the hull, where the man's body would drift next. "Tomas," she shouted, close now. "I've got you. Stop fighting it. Let me do the work." He grabbed for her like a drowning man does, too hard, wrong, nearly pulling them both under. Maren spun him, got behind him, wrapped her arm across his chest in a crossbody carry so old it lived in her spine, not her memory. His fingers clawed at her jacket, panic overriding every instinct that might have saved him. She'd seen it 100 times. The body doesn't know the rescuer is the answer. The body just knows it's drowning and grabs at anything solid. "Stop fighting me," she said again, sharper. "I need you loose, not rigid. Trust the line." He went slack, just enough. Just enough for her to get proper leverage, kicking hard against a current that wanted to pull them both toward the hull and the churning wake behind it. "Breathe with me," she said in his ear. "In, out, we're going up." She gave 2 hard tugs on the line, signal to haul. The crew on deck, more instinct than training, started pulling. The swell tried to take them under twice. Twice. Maren held her line, held Tomas, kicked hard against the drag, refused the water the thing it had taken from her 11 years ago. They broke the surface at the hull. Hands reached down. She pushed Tomas up first, always the survivor first, then let them haul her over the rail behind him. She hit the deck coughing seawater, shaking with cold, and looked up into a ring of faces staring at her like she'd grown wings. Someone wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Her whole body shook now, delayed adrenaline crash hitting all at once, the way it always did after, the way it had hit her 11 years ago on a different deck, in different rain, after a different rescue that hadn't ended the same way. Voss stood at the front of them, drenched, silent, his camera crew nowhere in sight, because for once nobody had thought to film. "Who," he said slowly, "taught you to do that?" Maren pushed wet hair off her face. 11 years of silence sat behind her teeth, and for the first time, she didn't swallow it. "The United States Coast Guard," she said. "Now get me back to my patient." She didn't wait for a response. She was already moving toward the infirmary doors, dripping seawater across the deck, her mind already back on a monitor, and a face she'd spent 11 years trying to forget, and 8 months failing to. Behind her, she heard Voss ask someone quietly, "Did she say Coast Guard?" Nobody answered him. They were all still watching the water where a rescue swimmer they didn't know they had just saved a man's life. By midnight, the storm hadn't broken, but the panic had organized itself into something closer to order. Rebecca's temperature held at 92.1. Tomas sat wrapped in blankets in the corner bed, alive, embarrassed, alternating between thanking Maren and asking crew members if anyone had gotten it on video. Nobody had. For once, nothing about that night existed anywhere except in the people who lived it. Priya moved between beds with a competence Maren hadn't fully noticed until tonight, checking vitals without needing to be told twice, learning fast the way good nurses learn fast when someone finally shows them what real triage looks like under pressure. Voss cornered her by the supply cabinet while Priya changed Rebecca's IV bag. "You need to explain yourself," he said, voice low, glancing at the door like he wanted witnesses without wanting them too close. "You went into a Category 3 storm without authorization. You performed medical procedures I didn't approve. If this woman dies, if that engineer had died, the liability falls on this ship, on me, and frankly on you for playing rescue swimmer without a current certification on file." "He's alive," Maren said. "She's alive. That's the outcome you're upset about?" "I'm upset that a nurse I've supervised for 8 months apparently used to be something else entirely and didn't think that was relevant information. It wasn't relevant, until it was." The satellite phone in the corner rang before Voss could answer. The cruise line's onboard representative, patched through from the mainland office, wanted a full report. Casualties, procedures used, any exposure the company should be aware of. Voss took the call in the hallway. Maren heard fragments through the door. Unlicensed intervention. Off-protocol rescue. Brand risk. A man 3,000 miles away, dry and warm. already trying to shape the story into something his legal department could live with. His voice carrying the particular calm of someone who had never once stood on a deck in a storm. He came back in with his jaw tight. "Corporate wants this handled quietly," he said. "No incident report naming specific procedures outside standard cruise medical protocol. No mention of you going into the water. Officially, ship's crew executed the rescue, and Priya and I stabilized the patients. You want to erase what happened. I want to protect this ship's certification and my own license," Voss said. "You should want the same. If this comes out wrong, they'll ask why an unlicensed nurse was performing tactical water rescue. You'll lose more than a job." Maren looked at Rebecca's monitor. 92.4 now, climbing. "I don't care what you write in your report," she said. "But I'm not lying about who's in that bed, or how she got here, or what it took to get her back." "You don't even know her," Voss said. "Do you?" Maren didn't answer right away. Priya, checking vitals, went very still, listening without pretending not to. "I knew her," Maren finally said. "A long time ago, off the coast of Nova Scotia. I was the one who pulled her out of the water the first time too. Only that time, I lost her under the surface for 2 minutes I still can't account for. She's had brain damage since. I requested a transfer 11 days later and never went back to full rescue duty again." The room went quiet except for the monitors and the wind outside. "That's not possible," Voss said. "That's an 11-year-old case. You'd have been 24, yes." He stared at her the way people stare at something that doesn't fit the shape they'd built for it. 8 months of dismissing her, of jokes about splinters, collapsing all at once into a silence he didn't seem to know what to do with. "Why didn't you say something?" he said. Not really a question. Because saying it doesn't change what happened to her. And because for 8 months, this was the only place on Earth I didn't have to be the woman who lost Rebecca Ainsley. Rebecca's monitor chirped, sharp and sudden, heart rate spiking, then dropping. Maren was at the bed before the sound finished. "She's seizing," Priya said, voice climbing. "Cold-induced arrhythmia," Maren said, already turning Rebecca onto her side, already clearing the airway, already counting seconds the way she'd counted them across 11 years and 1,000 miles of open water. "Get me the crash cart. Now." Voss didn't argue this time. He didn't ask for authorization, didn't mention corporate, didn't reach for a script. He simply moved, fast, competent, finally out of his own way. "Talk me through it," he said, gripping the cart. "Tell me what you need." Maren looked at him for 1/2 second, surprised despite everything. "Epi 0.3 milligrams IM now, and somebody radio the bridge. I need to know if we're in helicopter range because if her rhythm doesn't stabilize, she needs a level 1 trauma center faster than this ship can get her there." The intercom crackled to life before anyone answered. "Bridge to medical. We have contact with U.S. Coast Guard Sector Boston. They're asking if we require air medevac." Maren's hands didn't stop moving, but something in her chest, quiet for 11 years, sat straight up. "Tell them yes," she said. "Tell them we need an ASM crew, and tell them exactly what I'm about to say. Tell them AST Kessler requests immediate medevac for a cold water near-drowning patient, 92.1 degrees and dropping, cardiac arrhythmia present, ETA to stabilize unknown." The radio operator's voice cracked back through the intercom, uncertain. "Ma'am, did you say AST Kessler?" "Aviation Survival Technician First Class Maren Kessler," she said, not looking up from Rebecca's chest, hands already positioning for compressions if the rhythm didn't correct. "Retired. Tell them my old unit number if they need verification. Sector Boston will have the file." Voss stared at her like the floor had shifted under the whole ship. He didn't say anything. For the first time in 8 months, he didn't have a single line ready. Rebecca's rhythm steadied, thin but present, the epinephrine doing its slow work. Maren kept 2 fingers on her wrist, counting, refusing to let go of the pulse the way she'd refused to let go of the memory for 11 years. "Come on," she murmured. "Come on, not again, not like this." The wind outside had dropped from a scream to a growl. Through the porthole, a light appeared low over the churning water, a searchlight, cutting sideways through rain, growing steadier as it approached. "MH-60, Maren said, recognizing the engine pitch before anyone could confirm it on radio. "Jayhawk, Boston's closest air station. How do you know the sound of the helicopter? Priya asked, half to herself. Because I used to hang out the side of one on a cable, Maren said. The intercom crackled again, a new voice this time, clipped and professional, cutting through static. Meridian Star, this is Coast Guard Rescue 6042. We have confirmation on AST-1 Kessler. Retired, elite hoist qualification, cold water rescue specialist. Ma'am, if you're able, we'd like you topside to assist transfer. Over. Voss looked at her. They know you. Actually, know you. 11 years doesn't erase a service record, Maren said. It just buries it. She handed compressions duty to Priya, with 3 sentences of instruction, and moved, soaked jacket still damp from the first rescue, back toward the deck. Voss followed without being asked this time, carrying the transfer stretcher himself. Topside, the Jayhawk hovered 40 feet above the aft deck, rotor wash flattening the rain sideways, a basket already descending on cable through wind that would have grounded a lesser pilot. A rescue swimmer rode the basket down, visor up, scanning the deck. He saw Maren and went still for half a second, like he was checking his own eyes against a story he'd only ever heard secondhand. Kessler, he shouted over the rotor noise. I trained under your old instructor. Petty Officer Reyes talks about you like you're a ghost story. Tell Reyes I said hello, Maren shouted back. Patient's critical, cold water near drowning cardiac event 40 minutes ago, currently stable but fragile. She needs level 1 trauma, fast. They loaded Rebecca into the basket together, Maren's hands steady on the straps, checking each buckle twice out of habit that had never left her even after 11 years of trying to make it leave. You're not coming up? The young swimmer asked, surprised, as the basket began to rise. Maren looked at Rebecca's face one more time. Pale, breathing, alive. 11 years of guilt finally cracking open into something that wasn't quite forgiveness yet, but was close enough to breathe around. Not tonight, she said. But tell your flight surgeon everything I told your radio operator. Full report. No omissions. She looked pointedly at Voss as she said it. The basket rose into the storm, spinning slowly. Rebecca strapped and stable inside it, disappearing into the belly of the Jayhawk. The searchlight swept once more across the deck, across Maren standing soaked and steady in scrubs that had gone from bright cobalt to storm gray with rain. And then the helicopter banked west toward the mainland. Voss stood beside her, silent for a long moment. 8 months, he finally said. 8 months I called you the quiet nurse. I made jokes about splinters. You did. I'm sorry, he said, and it came out rougher than his television voice ever allowed. Genuinely. Not because of the cameras. There aren't any cameras up here. Maren looked at the horizon, the storm finally breaking east, stars showing through torn cloud for the first time in 6 hours. Her hands, finally, had stopped needing to hold anything. Everyone becomes something to survive whatever came before, she said. You built a persona to cover for not being good enough once, a long time ago. I built silence to cover for losing someone I couldn't save. Neither of us is required to stay hidden forever. Voss didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had lost every trace of performance. What happens now? Now, Maren said. I write the report myself, every detail, and then I make a phone call I should have made 11 years ago. 3 weeks later, Maren stood in a conference room at Coast Guard Sector Boston, dress blues on for the first time in over a decade, the fabric unfamiliar and exactly right at once. She'd stood in front of a mirror that morning longer than she wanted to admit, relearning how the uniform sat on shoulders that had spent 8 months trying to look smaller than they were. Rebecca Ainsley sat across the table, in a wheelchair, speech slightly slower than it used to be but sharp, present, alive. Her mother sat beside her, the woman who'd sent Christmas cards for 4 years to an address Maren had stopped checking, her eyes red-rimmed but steady. I've spent 11 years being told I was a miracle, Rebecca said. Nobody ever told me who actually pulled me out. Twice. You weren't supposed to know, Maren said. I didn't want you carrying my guilt on top of your own recovery. That wasn't your guilt to carry alone, Rebecca said. I was awake at the very end, under the water before everything went dark. I remember a hand. I've had 11 years to wonder whose it was, and some nights I even convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maren's throat tightened in a way none of the storm, none of the cold water, None of Voss's corporate phone calls had managed. "I'm sorry it took me this long," Marin said. "You came back," Rebecca said. "Twice, apparently. That's more than most people manage once." Down the hall, a review board waited. Commander Alyssa Wren, the officer who'd overseen Marin's original file, closed it gently as Marin sat down across from her. "Your incident report from the Meridian Star is the most thorough thing I've read in 15 years of these boards," Wren said. "Cold water rescue, improvised rigging, triage command, and a mass casualty event, all performed 8 months after you told this service you were done for good." "I thought I was," Marin said. "The engineer you pulled out, Tomas Reyes, no relation to your old instructor coincidentally, is walking around today because of a rescue this service didn't authorize, on a ship this service doesn't operate, executed by a woman we let go without ever asking if she should have stayed. I asked to leave. You didn't push me out." "No," Wren agreed. "But we didn't build anything to catch people like you either. Operators who leave carrying something they never processed, who take the quietest job on Earth and call it recovery when it's really just another kind of drowning, slower, on dry land. We're proposing a new program. Field medicine and rescue swimmer transition support, embedded with civilian and cruise line medical staff for exactly the kind of emergency you handled alone on that ship. We'd like you to design it. And run it." Marin thought about 8 months of quiet, of folding blankets with corners square out of habit instead of purpose, of flinching at alarms that sounded like a memory instead of a warning. She thought about the moment she'd finally stopped swallowing the truth in front of a dozen strangers in the rain. "I'm not disappearing into silence again," she said. "If I do this, it's not a cover. It's the job." "It's the job," Wren confirmed. Back at the Meridian Star's dock 2 days later, Voss found her on the gangway with her sea bag over one shoulder, dress blues traded back for civilian clothes, the Coast Guard tattoo on her ankle visible above her shoe for the first time in 8 months, uncovered on purpose. "The network wants to do a real episode," he said, "about what actually happened. No script. Your rules on what gets shown. No cameras on Rebecca," Marin said immediately. "And nothing that makes it about me being a hero. Make it about what almost went wrong because a hospital, a ship, or a program assumes competence is loud. Sometimes it's the quietest person in the room." Voss almost smiled. "That's a better line than anything my writers came up with." "It's not a line," Marin said. "It's 11 years of learning it the hard way." He shifted his weight, looking, for the first time since she'd met him, like a man without an audience to perform for. "For what it's worth," he said. "I'm canceling the Splinter joke from the pilot cut." "Good," Marin said. "Replace it with something true instead." She walked down the gangway into ordinary daylight. No storm, no alarm, no cable locking overhead. Somewhere behind her, a badge that had stayed silent for 8 months, finally stopped hiding. And somewhere ahead, a program with her name on it was waiting to make sure nobody else had to carry a rescue alone, in silence, for 11 years, before finally being allowed to come home. Respect isn't given by a title. It's earned by the moment you finally stop hiding what you survived. The end. If this story moved you, hit like and let me know in the comments which moment hit hardest tonight. Subscribe to Secrets of Silent Badges so you never miss the next one, because the quietest person in the room is often carrying the loudest story.